And today we got an oddball in the shop. It's a Kia something or other. So what happened here is you can see some scratching on the door. That was bent in. We had to pull that out. And basically, whatever they caught, cut the rocker. As you can see inside, there's absolutely no rust. And what you're looking at here is it's the inner structure, which is kind of like your crash bar, because this stuff here is like paper. It's very thin. And of course, the rust you do see, it's not because the car had any rust on it. That just basically scratched the paint off. So we'll grind all that off. And what we're going to do, we're obviously going to have to grind that out. There's going to be a little bit of fill right there. We might pull this dent out a little bit. But we got the bottom edge nice and straight. And because of supply chains and everything else, I couldn't get a rocker for this right away. And this car needs to be on the road. So here what I have, the strip. It's probably about 7/8, 3/4 wide, whatever it is. And we basically bent it perfectly to fit as a cover. We didn't go super thick. I think this is 20 gauge. This definitely ain't. It is literally paper. So we're going to make a rocker cover, and it's going to fit that nice. And then what we'll do, we're going to have to do a little bit of a body work to get it to blend in. And at the front, same thing. We'll do a bit of body work on the front. Now, if you want to do this, you got to be careful. Sometimes rockers are big and they shrink. Now, in this case, if I put my template here, it fits. Come back to here, it starts to get tighter because it gets bigger as it goes back. Now, turns out we're pretty lucky that this will also fit at the front. But right here, there's an edge that's got to be knocked down. So here, it's close enough that if we make our piece straight, it should fit on. You can see how that kind of dips down because that was all mashed in. But once we make our rocker cover, we can push that up. We're going to have to make it as tight as possible. It's going to be tough, but we're going to have to weld right on this bottom edge, which is going to suck. But that's what we're going to do. Then we want to get rid of some of this rust where the boot wore this off, so we're going to come up to here, which is why my top goes way, way in like so. So basically, yeah, it's a pretty nice car other than that little bit of damage on it. And it's a friend of mine that owns it. We were just literally going to replace the rocker or buy a section, and apparently nobody could find one. So I'm sure they're out there, but not for me, not today. So the next thing I did is I used a seamstress tape, and I measured this out, the whole length of it, and I made a piece big enough to cover what we need. And then to lay it out, sorry about that, I'm going to switch sides here. So the thickness of my line sort of indicates how sharp the bend is. Now, we don't have to be 100% accurate with this. We can knock it in with the hammer a bit and blend it in with a bit of filler, but you want to be close. So once I had all these marks, before I put this bend in, I basically crept around like so. So here you're going to see 3 lines. That's just something I do. The 2 little ones are kind of the beginning and the end of where it's round. Because we're going to bend it round, we might help it by hand, and we're going to go easy. We don't want to go hard where we put like a 90, because as you can see, the rocker is very round. So here I only got 2, but usually just to guide my bending, I'll bend a little bit more, a little bit more. And I took a piece like this that was just flat before I bent that, and I just ran it underneath and translated all those marks onto a piece. So I could bring that piece over there and translate it to that end. and it's on both sides. So this way I can bend one side, go to the next, and so on. So now we're going to hit the ever challenging, how do I film it? So our next bend is going to be on the back side. I took a second there, and hopefully you can see the marks. But basically, I put you on a tripod. So I've got those 3 little marks. I'm going to go on the first one. I'm going to go up a little bit, and I'm just kind of wobbling it as I go. I'm not going too crazy with it. I'll try to get it roughly in the 3rd mark. Make sure both sides are kind of the same. Not that it'll matter, because on the car it was a little tapered anyway. So as long as we're within the realm of where we want to be. And even though I'm pulling it out, this is kind of an inexpensive metal brake, so it's not going to be super duper sharp. So we're out too far. So I'm going to unbend this, and I'm going to concentrate my bend on the last line as opposed to the first line. If I come to this side, we're also out a little bit, but we're definitely a lot closer. If you see the finish on the metal, it's simply because I sanded it a little bit. Because once this is all bent, it's much harder to sand. You definitely want to get a little bit of a You definitely want to get a little bit of a bite on it for your primers and stuff, body filler to fit, or stick, sorry. It's a little bit closer, we can get that side tighter. This side goes on the front and it's right on the money, which is good. Now I'm going to pause this and start it back up again. I'm going to go fit it on the car before I bend it again. So when I put it on the car, the front fits perfect, but the back side right here, not so much. That whole bend's got to move in. And I'm just kind of pushing it in and using a bit of pressure to unbend our bend. When you do that, you can't just hold the one in though. You got to kind of hold the middle, because you want the whole thing to be gradual. And I'm kind of working it and it's kind of squeezing out, but that's okay. Okay, so we can move that in a little bit more. If I work it up and down, the other thing you can do when you set these up, I have it pretty much right on the edge, but if you back it up and you do a bit of figuring, you can kind of get a rounder bend out of it. It won't bend as sharp. And if you need a really hard 90, you want it as close as possible. You want to pull this up kind of in one go. So you can kind of see here where it's harsher here now. There's a little bit here. And I'm going to unbend that a little bit by hand, but I think that's going to give us what we need. And everything will be nice and round. And the idea is you want it to fit on the car as easy as possible, so it just sits on top and everything is as tight as it can be. So when you install it, it's just going to be that much easier. Now when I put this on the car, this goes a little far, so we're going to have to slightly round it. And I'm putting roughly 1/4 inch in. You don't want to do too much. There we go, that's perfect. Just so that it blends into the car. Now you'll notice when you bend metal, here might be bent a little more than this end. But if it's a little off, you can put it in like I did earlier and move it by hand on one side, and it'll kind of reshape. But in this case, this end isn't quite perfect, and if it isn't, we can always get our tongs or a pair of pliers that are nice and tight and just gently work it over. So that's not too bad. I'll be right back. I'm going to go fit it to the car again. So it fits the car pretty good now. You can see right there where I marked it with a pencil. So there's a little bit of an indent. In this area here. Now we can't get that on this bender. Now you could put it on a table over top of a broomstick or something like that and kind of try to work it. But if I catch it, I figure about so. We'll give it a little bit of a tweak. Not enough to really bend it, but you can see it's starting to try to lift up a bit. And we'll give it another 1/4 inch. Whoop. Give it a little more. Now we didn't quite need that much in it, but our shape is nice, straight, flows good. And I'm just using this now as a press to take the shape out, because we just want that to be real subtle. And if you see any lines in it, once you put it on the car, if I can show you that, you can see a couple little lines in it. Those lines, I mean, high build primer or a little bit of filler will take care of that. It's going to be very, very negligible. I'm going to take a little more out. You probably could have dropped the gauge. I could have dropped 1 gauge of metal to do this, and it would have been a little easier because I could have put it in, just kind of formed it by hand, but this will work just as good. You know, you take your time. Seems like a lot of kind of dicking around, but I mean, it is what it is. And this is a lot of this this kind of work. So if you're restoring something or making a panel, it don't matter what the vehicle is, but it's just to kind of get. Oh, there we go. It's actually working better this way with my thumb than in the bender. So we want to get that shape. We don't want to get too much. You can kind of take a little bit of it out. And some guys say, well, some of that'll come out when you force it on the car, tack the top. And then once this is welded, you can crush the bottom in until it all touches. But that's about the bend we want right there. You can see how it's very subtle. But it's in there and it'll hopefully match what's on the car. So I fit it to the car. Seems like it's going to work out okay. So now we got to make these next two bends. You can see how there is two harsh bends, but it's mostly round. I'm going to start with the one. Might be hard to get that last one, but we'll see how it goes. So we'll start by going right in the center of this line, just to get the metal to move a little bit. Not even putting much of a bend in it. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to push it in a touch, do the same thing. You can see how that bend twisted it up, it came a little further. So we're barely going to move that, if at all. And I'm going to go a little ways just in past. And the reason I made you can see on here, we got these two little lines right there. It's got to be wide, so I'm kind of just bending it 3-4 times in that spot. Just so that it's not a harsh bend and there's a bit of radius to sort of match what's on the car. And honestly, how close that is, you know, the closer you get it, the less hammering and fixing and filler and all this you got to put in. So now I'm going to go between my two lines to what I think is roughly center. And I'm not going to bend it, I'm just going to work it. And if you don't want to print a line in it, like I say, you can always move this back a little bit. But I'm working it so little, you can see how it's becoming a big round bend. So we do have this, and we know that this fits the car well. And you can see how our profile is going to match up nice, except for the very bottom. So I'm going to try to work on that bottom now. And sometimes if you don't have a lot of material in here, a good trick to that would have been to make this longer and cut it off at the end. And sometimes when you're working and you lose track of what you're sort of doing, you I went ahead and cut it off and thought about that later, and I thought, well, there's enough meat there, it should be okay, but if I can't quite get it right, I can always grab my tongs and gently work that one by hand. So again, just light on the bend. And I'm going to move it out the thickness of that line, like you saw those two lines I showed you a minute ago. So I just made it fat here so I could kind of go back and forth between. Now I've done this a lot, so if I make it look easy, well look, it is easy, and you can do this, whoever you are watching, but check it out. That's so close. So this corner's a little bit harsh. So worst case scenario, if everything else fits real nice, we'll grind a line out here, we'll hammer that in, put a little bead of weld, call it a day. It'll transition nice, it'll fit the car. Now, give me just a second. I paused the video here a couple times just so I could go fit on the car because I didn't want to waste your time with me running around and watching nothing. So I think I'm pretty much done. So let's go see how well it fits. And it probably won't be perfect, but it should be pretty close. Now it may not want to go all the way against the car because this here kind of dips down. Once I know this fits on the two ends well, I know it'll fit. We can bend that up, but we don't want to go up high. We want to go up a little bit at a time. I still got to grind all that and all the paint away so we can weld it or... Yeah, and that's what's kind of happening. But if I angle it around, that's going to fit right on the car. Let me see if I can push it in tight. There you got it. There's a little bit of an inconsistency right here, but we can gently massage that in with the hammer a little bit. But we're going to have to do a bit of a filler transition. We'll come out. Now here's something I did on purpose. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. I'm going to set this down for a second. So if the plate stops here, the indent is there, but right here, it's hard to get on camera. Here the indent is less. So from about, say, here to our metal, how do I show you that? See the gap? So we'll have lots of room there for the filler, and everywhere else it'll be like a little bit of a skim coat. So there'll be a little bit of filler, but it'll be very minimal. Now you could do a cut and butt. This stuff is really, really thin. Most of our structure is right here. This is like your crash bar. Now, had that been crushed, to repair this, depending where you live and the regulations and all that, this has to be repaired. But we were lucky this didn't get mashed up in any way, so we're happy. And it depends how old they are, whatever, but I mean, if that was all rusted, again, you'd have to take the rocker off and repair that, fix that, because that all has to be there. And the rule of thumb where I'm at, if you repair any of that, anything that's frame or structure, you got to put back what was there and more. So that's generally the rule of thumb here. Wherever you are, that's your thing. But if you're working on what I'm normally working on, you know, this stuff, well, that doesn't really apply much. So just put back what you can, right? So that's it. We're just going to slowly unbend this and work it up because we want... See if I can show you underneath. There's a lip right here, and this is where our panel stops, and the rocker actually goes up. So we're going to weld from underneath onto the up, and it'll be pretty easy. Then we can seam seal that. Probably from about here to here we'll do filler just so the transition is super smooth. We'll do that up in here a little bit too. Our plate comes up. The reason I bent the top earlier, because I realized right here it had to go up. And if I can't get it to fit quite tight, I can take a little bit off of that top just with the grinder, just eat a bit of it off. But it fits perfect at the front. Right here, that's kind of got to bend up. So I'm going to have to put a block in here and hammer that down and straighten it out. But we're welding up in here, so we'll be good. There's lots of room to clear the door. The rubber of the door comes up here, so there was no wind noise or nothing. Luckily, we didn't crush this in too much. Mind you, this was in quite a bit. And the first cut I made here, I cut a slice in it so I could put something in here and pull it. And now we're good enough where we're happy. We could move it a little more. I am going to knock this down a touch because it looks like there's a bit of an arc. You don't notice it when the plastic trim is there, but we'll knock it down a little bit because we got to knock this down a little bit too. But that's basically not a bad way. Now you can see that little bit of an indent in it. But it's not a bad way to make a rocker panel, or at least a patch panel. And I mean, if you wanted to do a big rocker panel, this same technique with a bigger bender and more steel and whatnot, you know, you got to work it and make it fit. So if I can do that in a 24-minute video, now I did come check the car 3-4 times while I checked the panel on the car. So it took me 30 minutes to do that. And we didn't have to buy a $200-300 rocker that goes down the whole side of the car and everything else, right? So Hope this was helpful. Cheers. Thanks for watching.